What's going on, guys? Today we have a very special guest in the building. We have one of my main inspirations when I started this content creation channel back in January. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself right now. Take it away.
Thanks, Mike. What's up, everybody? My name is Brandon Farbstein. I'm 22 years old and I'm a motivational speaker, author, and activist. And I'm also Mike's cousin, an important addition to that.
Yeah, so I got pretty lucky here that I'm able to have this wonderful fellow on the channel. I'm going to pull up his social media right here. You guys can all go follow him. As you can see, he has around 210,000 subscribers. He's a self-proclaimed world changer. And he actually just recently came out with a kid's book.
It's called A Kid's Book About Self-Love. That's my newest book.
Oh, okay. And then 10 Feet Tall was your original.
That's my first book.
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
So this is his Instagram channel. Obviously, he has the verified check mark, so he is legit. And here's the LinkedIn. So yeah, pretty big influencer on all platforms. Do you have any other platforms besides Instagram and LinkedIn?
I use Facebook some. It's definitely not one of my main just sources of like community or getting my message across to people. I would say Instagram and LinkedIn are definitely the two strong points right now.
Yeah, I feel like overall Facebook has kind of waned out with the younger crowd, and I feel like we gravitate more towards Instagram, and then
Mhm.
obviously for the business end, LinkedIn is the best there is, right?
Totally. But I think there's a place for being on them all, and I'm not saying like you need to spend all this time creating specific content for like every single platform, but what if there's a way to already use the content that you've created on multiple platforms? And so that's what I do. Let's say when I'm making an Instagram post, I basically post that same exact thing, make like a little bit of edits just in terms of the specific audience knowing. LinkedIn, just like you said, that's more of a business crowd. Instagram, more of a Gen Z slash younger crowd. So having that in mind, but yeah, I think that's important as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious though, what's your opinion on YouTube? You don't have a YouTube, do you?
I don't. I love YouTube though. Honestly, that's probably the number one social media that I personally consume. I just love whether it's like documentaries or keeping up with people's lives. And so I think there's a lot of value in YouTube for sure. Honestly, I don't have, in my opinion, the skills of being someone who can both be in front of the camera and then flip that and edit to create something that is really compelling or moving or whatever it is. And I think that's been my roadblock, to be honest. Though I would really love, I think, to find someone who I could add to my team that could already, again, use what I have in terms of like talks or interviews or whatever it is and chop that up into short form or longer form content, because as you know, YouTube is leaning into the like more TikTok stuff with YouTube Shorts, and I think short form video is definitely the new wave of social media just as a whole. And so if you're not following kind of the trends and where things are going, I think that's a big mistake.
Right, yeah. I think for someone like you who likes to keep your content more on the shorter end, I would argue, if someone could like collect a compilation of some of your best moments and make that into like a YouTube video, I
Hmm.
think that would be like revolutionary for your content.
Exactly. And I mean, even on like the other end of the spectrum, because I do a lot of talks in terms of like keynotes and panels and stuff like that. And those are quite long, like more than 30 minutes. So it's both finding the short form, how to make that into interesting content, but also on the longer end, how to chop that up into digestible, almost like sound bites that can be watched in like a couple of minutes or so.
Right. And then obviously on the other end of the spectrum, we're like talking about our current plans and aspirations. But I want to take it back a little bit, and I want to just like bring the viewers in by kind of a little summary of how you started getting into this content creation world and how you like truly immersed yourself into it.
Yeah, so I would say on this entire journey, my starting point was when I was 15, and that is when I gave a TED Talk. And that talk was basically the first time that I shared my story or the first time that I put myself out there. And I didn't have any sort of expectations as to what would come out of that. But that really was the moment that I discovered the power of authenticity and putting yourself out there so that others can see themselves in you, because we don't necessarily know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes, but if they're sharing a story or a life experience, chances are we could relate to aspects of that. And I discovered that firsthand as a freshman in high school, and I started this journey of speaking and advocacy and overall just being on a mission that was so much bigger than myself, because I found through sharing the unique lived experience that I have, and again, an important piece of context to that we haven't talked about yet. I was born with a rare form of dwarfism, so I stand at 3'9", and I absolutely used to hate that aspect of myself. I was so angry at the world. I was angry at just my life in general, and I didn't think that there was a purpose to me being me. And then again, going back to that moment when I was 15, that TED Talk, it made me discover that being unique and having something that others don't have is a superpower, and you have the ability to use it for good and to, share it with people, or you could let that define you and be the ultimate roadblock to even showing up in the world in the first place. And when you have a disability or you're born different or whatever the background that you were put here into, it can be really difficult to go against that, because the world is saying, no, you have to be this way. You have to look like all these people. You have to be normal. But the truth is, there is no normal. There is no like blending in where we're all gonna be the same person and walk the same way, think the same, like all those things. It's just not possible. The way that the world is, we're different, and that's an awesome thing in my opinion, because that's what we're able to really lean into to create the life that we are meant to live. And I think I'm a great example of that, because 7 years later I'm doing that exact thing. I've become a professional speaker. I'm booked at companies from Meta to Louis Vuitton, Foot Locker, Amazon. I speak to sometimes their entire employees, smaller groups, and then students, colleges, everywhere in between. It's fun.
So you touched on some amazing points right there. First of all, I think that the fact that you started your career off with something so like earth shattering as going up in front of 2,000 people is obviously like, I would argue it's one of the hardest things you could do as a person. So the fact that you broke through that fear right off the bat probably was like monumental in your ability to turn around your success so quickly.
Totally.
And the other thing too is that I can really relate to you. Obviously, like the viewers all know the story of how I was born with cerebral palsy. So in that way, I am also very different from like those around me. And in the content creation space, man, that's honestly the best thing you can be, is different, because everyone's doing the same thing, right? Everyone can do like the TikTok stunts and whatever is like trending right now, right? But in order to really like tap into some sort of different niche, you need to be able to relate to them, as you already said. So sure. I think like relatability is something that is an amazing tool, and the fact that we were born with things that automatically put us at a disadvantage, just like by default makes us
Right.
able to relate to people in ways that others probably wouldn't really understand, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. You don't necessarily, just like I said before, you don't need to be in someone else's shoes to relate to their experience. And I think it's really important to share your story just in the first place, because when it comes to, let's say, disability as a whole, I think a lot of people have the wrong idea with disability, that it's this inherently bad thing and that you should feel sorry for anyone that's born with, a disability, or that walks in a different way than you, or whatever it is. And that's just wrong. That's obviously not the case. And it's so relevant that people literally will cringe when they hear the word disability. And I would say for the majority of folks that I personally have met on the journey that have a disability, they want to use that word. They don't want to be called special needs or differently abled or all of these other terms that like dance around what it actually is. It is a disability. We are born with something that is a condition. Let's just put the facts as they are. So you don't need to, I think I also want to give people permission with this. You don't need to shy away from that. And also, Mike, I know you would agree to this. No matter what you may think the other person may have, whether it's a disability or not, just ask for their name. Call them by their freaking name.
Yeah.
And I promise you, that will go so much farther than you in your head trying to figure out, what is the correct term? What is the PC thing that I should be calling this person? I mean, yes, that is important to use respectful language and use language that is, not bringing others down, but at the same time, just see somebody for who they are and call them by their name. Period.
Yeah, like I don't know about you, but if someone was to genuinely approach me and like try and understand what my issue was and what exactly the disability is, like really ask questions about it, I wouldn't actually be offended at all.
Absolutely.
I would view that person as very insightful and probably super interested in what I have to offer, because they're asking about something that is probably more uncomfortable for them to ask you about than you to hear, right? Because
totally.
It's totally like stigmatized.
Yeah.
And also what a lot of people fail to realize is that like we're disabled, right? But we never knew what it felt like to like be tall or to like run. In my case, it would be to run. So it's not like we know what it's like, but we were taken away from that. We were like it was pulled away from us in the event of a car crash or something. We don't know what it feels like not to have it. So this is like our normal. This is literally as normal as it gets for us. It's always been the case. So just like arguing that it isn't normal would just be a falsehood, right? Because clearly it is.
And also saying that it's a tragedy. I love what you just said, because it isn't something that you need to, again, like be feeling sorry for us for, or like just looking down upon those who you think have it hard in life. Like, yes, you could have empathy and you could have the ability to try and think about what it's like in that person's life, but at the same time, it's not going to do anything for you or that person if you're just like, oh, it must suck to be in a wheelchair. It must, really be terrible to not be able to see properly, or like whatever that misconception is. I think we all have those, to be honest, and it's okay to acknowledge that, but that doesn't mean we need to let those become like the reality of how we interact with people, or again, even acknowledging somebody's humanity to begin with.
If I were to like take a piece of paper and write down the names of every single one of my friends, none of them have a disability, right? But I could write down a problem that each of them have. that isn't a disability that I would not want to have, right?
Totally.
They're all gonna, everyone has something wrong with their life. I've yet to meet someone who's completely perfect. If they claim to be, they're likely lying, or
Facts.
they just don't have a personality. Because if you haven't endured any hardship throughout your entire life, it's just been as smooth sailing as it can be, then you're not going to be able to relate to anyone, and it's just going to be a boring life for you.